Hello everyone, my name is Kierra Harris. This is my family tree. As you can see, I do have a lot of information here. I was very fortunate enough to have pretty much all my grandparents alive and well to be able to give me a lot of information here. But we're gonna start with my father. My father, his name is Anthony Harris. He was born in Gary, Indiana. By the way, everyone in my family speaks English. There was no language barriers at all. Everybody speaks English. So he's born in Gary, Indiana. He got his bachelor's in sports medicine, and he started getting his master's degree, but unfortunately never finished. And if you keep going back, we have his father. He was also born in Gary, Indiana. And just to give you guys a heads up, pretty much everybody in my family was from Mississippi, some part of Mississippi, and ended up moving to Indiana just because during that time period, way back then, the steel mill companies it was very hot and alive, and everybody was, and that's where all the money was at. So everybody moved from the south to the north in order to create better lives and to have a lot of good families out there, to create families out there. So as we go down, you'll see how everyone went from Mississippi, and then all of a sudden, like, my parents are from Indiana. So my grandfather has 1 year of college, and then his parents, neither one of them have that we know of have any education experience, but we don't know anything about his father. I guess after him and Rosalie kind of cut ties, he kind of cut ties with the rest of the family. And then going back to my grandmother, she got 1 semester of college at Purdue University. And then later on, she kind of bounced from job to job, and I asked her, what was the deal with all that? And she said, due to layoffs and trying to get better pay, and then trying to raise a son at that time as well, it was kind of difficult to maintain a steady job that had good pay. And then her parents, Janora Darby, her highest form of education was high school. She did go all the way to 12th grade. She had 6 siblings, and that's another thing that you're going to see as a pattern going all the way through my family tree. Having that many children back then was very necessary, because when they worked on their farms, they needed children to take care of the farms and make sure that everything was put together, because they didn't have the money to hire people to do it, so they had children. And those who did not have that many children, according to my grandparents, those who did not have that many children is because either their farm or their land or where they lived wasn't as big as others, so they didn't need to have that many children. So I thought that was very interesting. So here's we call her Grandma G. She had a high school degree. She had 6 siblings. And it's interesting, her family, they were very fortunate enough to be able to, she grew up on the farm, but when she got married, she got to move to the city. So, back then, living in a city was kind of nice. Let's see. And then my great-grandfather, Leander Terry Emmons, he's also from Mississippi. He was definitely definitely a hardworking man over here. And then going back to great-great-grandparents. So this is where things get interesting. So we couldn't find a lot of information on my great-grandfather, Leander Terry's parents, although we did know that his father's name was Emmanuel Emmons, and he had 2 sets of families. And it was interesting to understand this because back then, it was a lot of things going on, and although education was not very a big deal, it was all about having families and making sure that there were things that needed to be taken care of were taken care of. On my great grandmother's side, is interesting because here he is the only one in my family who was from South Carolina and then moved to Mississippi. We're not exactly sure why he moved to Mississippi, or why he left South Carolina, but everybody's just still trying to figure things out. Now, moving on to my mom side of the family. She has 3 sisters. She has her bachelor's in accounting and her master's in management. She's also from Gary, Indiana. And then my grandmother, her name is Louise Patrick. She got her high school diploma, as well as my grandfather. They were fortunate enough to finish high school. They had three daughters together. Going on my grandmother's side, my great grandfather, according to him, he even though his higher form of education is 4th grade education, he was a very smart man. He's actually, fun fact, he's actually the only one, and it was this big field of land, and many African Americans tried to keep up this land and to make sure that it was all set up and it was owned by this white man, and the white man was, he always made deals with African Americans to let them know, like, hey, if you can keep up this land, eventually it could be yours. But no one could ever keep it up except for my great grandfather, Oliver Patrick. He was so smart. He got this land, and he was the only one able to keep it up, and eventually he owned 106 acres of land. Now, back then, for African American to own that much land was pretty uncommon, so it was pretty neat to know that. And as you can see, he has 11 children. My great grandmother, Grandma Callie, she only got a 4th grade education. And so as you can see, as you go back, it's like the education gets smaller and smaller. And it's all about working and having families. My great grandmother, Callie, she became a midwife. And even though she had no license, that's all African Americans could afford, was someone that actually knew what they were doing. On my grandfather's side, he only went to 2nd grade because he had to help with family duties. He had to leave school in order to help with family duties. So, like I said, as you can see, the education goes back. It gets smaller and smaller. His mother, she actually got to finish 8th grade. And then later she became a head cook in the cafeteria. And as we go further back, it's not much information here, but everybody on my grandmother's side and my grandfather's side, they all worked some type of work, whether they were cooks or they owned their own stores or what all they did was work. And they were all from Mississippi. So as you see, this is my family tree. And like I said, education was it wasn't a big deal up until pretty much my grandparents. And then like my parents, they kind of stopped it. Thanks, guys.